Returning to our top stories, and in breaking news out of Israel, the military is expanding its ground operations on the Gaza Strip by launching an unprecedented bombardment on Hamas. Well, joining me live is Ian Parmeter, Middle East specialist at Australian National University's Centre for Arab and Islamic Studies. Ian, thank you so much for joining us. Earlier today, the United Nations General Assembly voted in favour of, quote, immediate, durable and sustained humanitarian truce. That's between Israeli forces and Hamas militants in Gaza. Now, the vote, as you well know, was 120 in favour, 14 against and 45 abstentions. This is not legally binding. However, the world is watching. How much of an influence, if at all, will this have on the ground?
Well, I think there are a few lessons to be drawn from the General Assembly vote. First of all, it shows up the dysfunction at this point of the UN Security Council. They've had many attempts to pass a resolution, but have failed at each point because either the United States or Russia and China have vetoed the draft resolution, whereas the General Assembly has come up with, I think, what would generally be seen as a balanced resolution. Australia decided to abstain, but in our explanation of vote, we made the point that we could have voted for it if the resolution had made a point of referencing Hamas as the group which really caused all this. But as it was with 120 votes in favour, that's nearly 2/3 of the General Assembly number of 193. And what it indicates for Israel and for the United States is that the world will be watching very closely what happens as this ground invasion ramps up. And I think we can have little doubt that that is what's happening now. And I think in practice, Israeli decision makers will be aware that they have a limited window of opportunity in which to achieve their objectives before international opinion could very well make it very difficult for them to continue. So we'll just have to watch and see over the next few days how that develops.
And Ian, under international law, Israel has the right to defend itself. To what extent does that exactly mean?
Well, yes, it does. All states have the right to defend themselves, but there's another pillar to this, which is international humanitarian law. And essentially, international humanitarian law indicates that the retaliation or the self-defense has to be proportionate to the threat, and also has to be done in a way that minimizes casualties to civilians. So the problem for Israel will be that Hamas is very much embedded with civilians. This is just their modus operandi. They really just operate in civilian structures and within hospitals, within schools. And Israel, if it wants to protect itself, will take those out. But in the event, when they do this, they will almost certainly kill civilians. Now, at this stage, about 7,000 civilians in Gaza have been killed, and about 12,000 tons of bombs, of explosives, have been dropped. And then now the question of proportionality is going to come out. To what extent can the deaths of 7,000 people, over 2,000 of whom are children, really be justified with what is now going to happen? One of the points I think we need to bear in mind is there are many around the world, and I actually am one of this opinion as well, that the objective to eliminate Hamas completely can't be achieved because Hamas is an ideology as much as a militant movement, and even if Israel is able to decapitate the leadership of Hamas, there will be more from the lower levels of Hamas who will be quite pleased to come up and put their hands up after the operation is over and saying, well, we're taking over Hamas now and we're still here. The other aspect, of course, is what might take Hamas's place. And there are some very militant groups in Hamas in Gaza that are even more militant than Hamas. Palestinian Islamic Jihad is one of them. But it's a delicate situation, this question of international humanitarian law, and there are many far more expert people who look at this extremely closely, and there will be judgments made at the end of this as to whether Israel has carried out its operation proportionately and in accordance with international law, which really says civilian loss of life needs to be minimised.
And Ian, do you mind telling us a little bit more about the structure of Hamas and, in your opinion, what percentage roughly of Palestinians are supporters of Hamas?
Well, the structure is they have various committees, but essentially it involves two wings. One is their social services wing, and the other is their militant wing. And it was the social services wing which really got popular support for Hamas going in 1987, when it was established early in the first Intifada, because the social services wing actually did provide much needed assistance to people who were affected by the Intifada, who were very poor, to children, etc. And they won a lot of support that way. And they've been getting money from the United Nations, from the state of Qatar, for that purpose. The militant wing was established a little bit later, but during the first Intifada. And it has become far stronger. And inevitably, there are questions about whether funds that are given by various international bodies to Hamas for its social services work are transferred over to the militant wing. I think we'll have to assume that probably does happen. But just in terms of the popularity of Hamas, just by coincidence, in an issue of the American Journal of Foreign Affairs that I was reading this morning, they published the results of a reputable survey that was completed in the month up to the 6th of October, really just before the start of the Hamas attack on Israel. And it showed that, just looking at it here, 67% of Gazans didn't have any confidence in Hamas at all, either very little or no confidence in Hamas, with only 29% saying that they had some confidence or a lot of confidence. Now, that looks pretty bad for Hamas on the face of it. But the problem was that the rest of the analysis shows that at times in the past, when these surveys have been done, as there has been a growth in pressure put on Israel when wars have occurred between Israel and Hamas, as there have in recent years, that support for Hamas from the people of Gaza actually grows. So this is a dilemma for Israel. The other point I might make is that in terms of what could take Hamas's place, one of the questions that was asked was, would you prefer the current leader of Hamas, Ahmad Haniyeh, or the leader of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, to be leader of the leader in Gaza? Now, as it was, 24% voted for Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, only 24%. Only 12% voted for Mahmoud Abbas, but over 30% voted for somebody else entirely called Marwan Barghouti. And Barghouti is actually in an Israeli jail, in jail for multiple murders of Israelis. And he's someone who is involved with the direction of the two intifadas. So there's no chance of him being there. But the point was that no Palestinian leader at the moment is seen as being trustworthy or popular with the Gazans, and that is a further dilemma for Israel.
Very interesting indeed, Ian. We are going to have to wrap this up, but I did want to quickly ask you, we've heard about the potential 7,000 civilians in Gaza killed and possibly 2,000 of those children. We're also seeing people in Israel virtually living on the edge, hiding in bunkers, grieving their loved ones who died on October 7, and no doubt very anxious about their loved ones in the military. Can you tell us about some of the history and tension between Israelis and Palestinians?
Well, it really is a very sad and tragic history. I mean, tragic for both sides because so many innocent people on both sides have been killed. I mean, the state of Israel started in war in 1948. Since then, there have been wars fought in 1956, 1967, and 1973. And then we had the peace treaty involving Egypt and Syria Egypt alone and Israel, which at that point really prevented the state-on-state war. But we then had in 1982 a massive invasion of Lebanon by Israel, which led to a lot of deaths on both sides. The only time I've ever felt confident about or felt the sense of optimism about the situation in the Middle East was at the time of the Oslo Accords in 1993 and 1994. But they were really destroyed when the Prime Minister of Israel at that time was assassinated by another Israeli in 1995. After that, it became impossible for the courts to be driven through. But since we've had, at the same time, two major Palestinian uprisings, and we've had 4 wars in Gaza, so many people have been killed. It is just something which hangs on in the minds of people both in Israel and in Gaza and in the West Bank, for that matter as well. As well as that, there was the 2006 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, which can actually, there are a lot of people hurt on both sides there, but it just shows that none of these problems appears to have a resolution at this stage. So we can expect more fighting and more deaths of innocent people.
It certainly sounds that way, and unfortunately we've run out of time, but I'd love to speak to you again. We'd love to get you back and talk more, because we really appreciate your time and insights. Ian Parmeter, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.